Welcome you all back, and our distinguished attendees will move to the next session titled that how we can have the money, the leader who will all show to work with قيادة ملهمة لأثر مرعب and with Mrs. ماريا ومؤسسة شركة ترانسفورم 8. أهلا بكم ومرحبا في
A legacy of a conscious leader. The session will be led by Ms. Maria Hago, the founder of Transform 8. Ms. Hago, please, welcome. The stage is yours.
Great. Good afternoon. I was going to say good morning, but it's already afternoon. I'm absolutely thrilled to be here with you today, not only because one of my core values is knowledge, and of course celebrating knowledge together like this at the Knowledge Summit is absolutely fantastic, but also because I get to speak to you all about one of my passion projects around conscious leadership and about how we can drive more conscious leadership into our organizations to create more human-centered, more productive, more outcome-focused, actually, organizations, but through that inner development. So let me just get my little clicker in action. And so because we're going to be talking a lot about the brain today, which is one of my sort of focuses around neuroscience, I thought we would start with a small demonstration. I'm going to have to think about this because I don't have a mic on me, but can you hear me on this? Yes? Is it on? Not connected? Okay, we'll improvise. Oh. Now it's gone. Oh, here we go. Okay, perfect. So if I can ask you, if you're comfortable and able to stand up, if I can ask you to stand up, we're going to start with a small brain activating exercise, okay? Also to be a little bit annoying, because of course we don't really like doing these sort of engaging things, right? We just want to sit quietly and mind our own business. So I'm going to have to put this away because I'm going to demonstrate, and I'm going to hope that you hear me. So if you can follow me, you put first one hand on your nose and the other hand on your ear. And then you switch. And then you switch. Yeah, it's harder than it looks. And then you switch. And again. And can you go faster? How fast can you go? How is that brain doing? Ooh, it makes your brain actually feel a bit busy, right? Because it's activating both sides of our hemispheres. So let's try it again with something slightly easier. One hand on the shoulder and the other side. And on the hip. And on the other hip. And on the knee. And on the other knee. And on the shoulder. And on the other shoulder. And on the hip. And on the other hip. And on the knee. And on the other knee. Fantastic. Okay, one last one just to really test. Okay, so one last one just to really test. So put your hands up like this, and the thumb out on one hand, and the pinky on the other hand. And then switch, and switch, and switch. This one's even hard for me. Switch, switch. I see people doing all kinds of things. It's really tricky, huh? And you can feel your brain is working really hard, even if it's something so simple. Well done. Fantastic. Well, great. Round of applause to yourselves for that effort. Fantastic. So let's see if we can get this other microphone working again. And then we'll get perfect. Fantastic. So that is a great way, whenever you're feeling a little bit sluggish, to get your brain to be fully activated. And in fact, we're going to talk today a little bit about both left brain and right brain thinking, because it's a crucial component in conscious leadership. So, $8.8 trillion. That is an absolutely astounding number.
I can't even compute what that is. It's about 50% of China's GDP. Even that's difficult for me to comprehend. But let's just say that it's a lot of money. And this is basically what it costs our global workforces in the loss due to disengagement in the workplace. So imagine what that looks like for your organization. Obviously, the 8.8 trillion is not going to your bottom line directly, but some of it is. So maybe you can do a calculation for your own organization, what that looks like. What's that number for you? And this is measured through the loss of productivity. The average worker actively works 2 to 3 hours out of 8 hours in a workday. So it's food for thought. A, why is that, and how can we get people to be more productive? But also, does it give us that room to be slightly more flexible with our employees? If they come in a bit late, if they need to leave a bit early, if they have something else to take care of. And that is part of being the conscious leader, is allowing that flexibility. And now that we know that the average person is anyways only doing 2 to 3 hours of work out of 8, maybe we don't have to be so rigid. It's also looking at turnover rates, so people leaving organizations because of disengagement, customer satisfaction that is much lower with a disengaged employee, etc. Reduction in innovation and creativity, which also has a massive impact on that bottom line. So it's a big enough number that we have, that it's got my attention, and certainly I hope that it has your attention as well. So when we look at our engagement scores, only 23% of people are actually engaged in their work. So those are the green guys there. That means that 77% of people are not engaged. So I want to ask you a question. Who in this audience dreams about being disengaged at work? I don't see any hands going up, strangely enough, right? Because nobody's trying to be disengaged. Nobody wants to live a life that's disengaged. Because when we're disengaged from our work, it also overspills to our personal life. And there we see an even more devastating statistic. This is a statistic that's based on how we perceive our personal well-being, happiness, and purpose in life. So forget about the work. This is talking about life. And if life is not to be lived happy, engaged, with purpose and well-being, then what are we doing? Then what is the point of it all? What are we have this one life, and if that is how the outcome is, imagine what's being lost for humanity, for each individual, for all those 77% of people, or for all these 66% of people that are disengaged, struggling or suffering in their personal life. That makes my heart break, and I hope it does yours too. But the good news is that we have ways that we can work through this, through conscious leadership. But I want for a second for us to reflect on, what does this disengagement from life and work, how does that impact all these different industries? Let's just have a little reflection of what goes on in our food production industry or our pharmaceutical industry, or maybe when we look at global conflicts, maybe when we look about our education system and human rights. We talked in the last session about EQ in AI. Well, if we're disengaged in work and life, how will that translate into the AI models of the future? It's really food for thought here. And how can we, the time is now to start making a shift. This can also be seen within our workplaces, where mental health crisis is growing. We see stress and burnout as super prevalent within our workforces, which is heartbreaking. But not just heartbreaking, but it also is impacting our performance and our bottom line results. Even when we look at psychological safety, diversity and inclusion, and tolerance, we are seeing very slow progress. We've been talking about these things for decades, yet we're not making much progress. And I hope today that we're going to be able to dive in a little bit as to what that is. Because I believe that it's great to have wellness programs and education awareness sessions within our organizations. But I think what we need now more than ever is to create work cultures that focus on building sustainable work practices and not just ways to recover from them. Because when the systems are broken, it is impossible for the humans to heal. And this is what I call human sustainability. In fact, we had the opportunity at Expo a few years back, Expo 2020, to have these conversations in roundtable formats at the Sweden Pavilion. I'm originally from Sweden, hence the link. And of course, the Sweden Pavilion was in the Sustainability Pavilion. And my argument was that how can we even talk about sustainability without considering human sustainability first? Because unsustained humans cannot think in sustainable ways, cannot make those conscious decisions about our planet and clean water and education and equality and all of those things. So it's a really important conversation. And I think one of the things that I have considered through my research of the last 5 years on this topic and with the approach from neuroscience is that we are looking at it in the wrong way. We are looking at struggling systems and we're trying to fix the systems in order to help the struggling people. But as we can see, it's not working. And I think what we need to do instead is switch this around and look at how can we heal the struggling leaders who can then in turn fix the struggling systems and then in turn help all the people within the organization to thrive. Because I believe that a healed leader can create and build and develop healed systems. So we've all seen this statement that employees don't leave organizations, but they leave managers. They lead bad leaders. Well, they leave unconscious leaders, because it's unconscious leaders that are driven into bad leadership behaviors, right? And this is causing and creating a tremendous amount of stress within our organizations, within the leader, who then spreads it to their teams. It causes disengagement, that causes more stress, and then we get stuck in this ever-ending loop of stress and disengagement. And I think that instead of just blaming our leaders for being bad leaders, I don't know how many of you have ever experienced that as a leader, where you're constantly worried about people resigning because you think you're going to get blamed as the bad leader because people don't leave organizations, they leave bad leaders, or those engagement scores coming out judging you as a leader, even though you're trying to do your best, but because you're stuck in this stress loop, you can't think clearly and operate properly. And I think this is really amplifying the issue. And I think what we could better do with our time is to focus on these more important questions, which includes, are we choosing the right leaders to begin with? When we recruit leaders, are we also looking for those more human skills of empathy and compassion and being able to drive and inspire our people? Or are we only looking at sort of performance metrics? Although those are important too, but we're going to learn that they're directly correlated anyways. So if we focus on the human skills, the financial skills follow, performance follows. We also need to reflect on, are we celebrating the right leadership skills within our organization? So when we are celebrating our leaders, is that based on just the bottom line results? Or are we also looking at some of the softer skills, some of the more human conscious skills of leaders? And of course, are we developing our leaders in the right way? I mean, I know that I didn't receive any conscious leadership or inner development training during my business studies. I also didn't receive any of that even during my 20-year corporate career. I think we're sort of starting a little bit to get introduced to these topics, but not in a fundamental way that's really required to make that shift. So here's a really interesting statistic that came out from a white paper that was published by Zenger-Folkman on the key insights of the extraordinary leader. So we can see here that results-focused leaders are perceived as being great leaders at a 14% level if their main focus is results. And leaders who are focused more on compassion and communicative skills, they have a 12% chance of being seen as a great leader. But now the interesting part is that leaders who demonstrate both of these have a 72% chance of being seen as a great leader. So it really indicates that we cannot have one over the other. Conscious leadership is not about just being empathetic and connective and compassionate and all of those nice words. But it's really about having both. Now for the kicker is that only 1% of leaders fit into that category. So we have a lot of work to do. And I hope after today, at least we have a room full of people that will be inspired to start or continue their journey as conscious leaders to bring that 1% up to at least maybe 10% by next year and a little bit more after that. So let's have a little look at one of the bigger things that stands in our way, which is stress. Who here has ever experienced stress? Hands up. I see a few people who haven't. I'll speak to you afterwards because I'll need to do some studies on you. So yeah, we find that obviously 100% of people have experienced stress. Some people out of control stress that might lead to burnout, etc. But everybody experiences stress. So let's have a little look at our brain for a second. And just see what happens and why I believe that stress is such a big culprit of bad leadership, let's say. So we have here it's a simplified version of our brain, but we have our prefrontal cortex here at the front of our brain. And then we have the limbic brain, which is in the center of our brain. So the prefrontal cortex it's basically your thinking brain. If you're a knowledge worker, this is the part of your brain that you're paid for to use at work, basically. It's your logic, your analytical skills, your problem solving, your reflecting, etc. But it also incorporates your intuition, and it also incorporates insight and your emotion regulation. So just as I'm saying this, just think about if these things are not working as well as they could, what would happen? Response flexibility, so your ability to adapt your response versus just a reaction, right? With our prefrontal cortex, we can logically separate our triggers from what's happening in front of us or the conversation that we're having, and we can then choose how we reply or respond in a more sustained way so that it doesn't break down those relationships. Also, our morality. So when we go back to that first slide, when I was talking about our food industry, pharmaceutical industry, education industry, imagine if we're under so much stress that our prefrontal cortex is not working properly, and these people have a lower morality and are making decisions that is affecting us globally. Food for thought. Imagine in conflict situations where people cannot reach consensus because of this phenomenon. Attuned communication, so being able to really connect with the person that you're communicating with, and our fear modulation, which of course perpetuates the stress. So when the limbic brain, which is it's responsible for our fight and flight responses, right, our reactions, it also is in charge of our emotions, which is why when we go into stress, we tend to get more emotional. Can anyone relate to that? Yeah. So the limbic system is always seeking to be safe, protected, and a sense of belonging. And when we don't feel safe, protected, or have a sense of belonging, it starts to respond as fight or flight. And then all the things on the other side of our prefrontal cortex diminishes. So it's a really important point, actually, to reflect on. If we're suffering from a lot of stress within our organizations, one of the biggest challenges that we see in the workplace is relationships, relationship breakdowns, conflict, right? Has anyone ever experienced conflict at work? Yeah. Again, all the same people's hands are going up. But it's absolutely true. It's one of the things that we are actually seeing in shocking numbers these days. And it's getting worse. I've been in the UAE for 12 years, and over the last 5 years, we've really seen an amplification of conflict in the workplace. And I think a lot of it has to do with this unmanaged stress. And of course, we hear this topic about burnout all the time, right? It's in all the media and in the newspapers and in all the research, because it's a very important topic. So basically, burnout can come from prolonged levels of unchecked stress and the inability to recover from them. So not having stress response or stress management practices in place. And there's lots of things that impact that. If we're not getting sleep, and we're not being connected with nature, and we're not doing yoga or meditation or breathing exercises to down-regulate our nervous system, these things sound like a cute idea, but actually they're fundamental in our leadership skills. And without them, we face all of these challenges. But burnout can also come from a disconnection, a detachment from what we're doing. That disengagement, prolonged disengagement, can create burnout. So you can feel and experience burnout even if you're not working in a super high stressed environment. It doesn't have to be based just on stress. And I think that's a really important distinguishing point that we're not always talking about. So it could be, for example, very frustrating systems at work, with people dropping the ball all the time and you're not making the progress that you want, or even working with people that don't seem to have the same level of engagement as you do. That, in a prolonged way, can lead to burnout. Emotionally, physically, and mentally. So it's really important that we don't just look at the stress, although stress is very often an amplifier and a guilty party. So I wanted to do a little meet your nervous system challenge. But I'm going to need a volunteer. I was hoping that we'd have two, but now we have one. Oh, we have our first volunteer right here. Okay. If I can get this mic working again. Okay, wonderful. Hi. Nice to meet you. Thank you so much. Okay, so we don't have a table, but we're going to use this here. So if you could just come and stand here on the side. Yes. First, I'm going to ask you don't have any underline. Okay, great. So, as I said, I wanted us to experience our nervous system. So here, you're already stressed. Well, this is actually going to also help you. But I say time to chill because in here we have an ice bath. Has anyone ever experienced the full submersion in ice? Yeah, a few people. Okay, fantastic. And was it challenging? Yeah. Yes. So it's extremely challenging, but how do we feel afterwards? energized, our moods are uplifted, our nervous system gets strengthened, and our minds get strengthened, because when we learn to do difficult things, when we learn to push through difficult challenges, it really helps us to address all kinds of challenges. It improves that resilience. So we're going to do this here, but we're going to do it only with a hand. And actually the research shows that we don't get as high a level of boosts as we do from the full submersion, but that there's still a relevance in doing it with a hand. So I'm going to ask our kind volunteer to... Actually, you don't really need that, unless you need to scream in it for help. So if you can just pull your sleeve up a little bit, yeah? And I'm just going to ask you to submerge your hand into this water and hold it there for 30 seconds. Yeah. Do you think you can do that? You happy to do it? Okay. Okay, so go ahead. And you can put it all the way down. Yeah, don't worry if the water spills over. Okay, so how do you think she's feeling right now? Pain? Yes, potentially coming quite soon. How's it feeling?
Actually, it's good. No,
Good. She's strong. Okay, so we give her a few more seconds. I've got the timer on here, but at first usually doesn't feel like very much at all. And then our nervous system starts to kick in, because it's going, take your hand out of this water, it's too cold, you're gonna die. Of course, we know we're not gonna die because it's only the hand and we can pull it out whenever we want. So we have to use our logical prefrontal cortex to override that fear. How's it feeling now?
a little bit numb.
Yeah.
I feel numb, a little
Okay.
bit. Yeah, there is. Yeah, there is.
You're doing very well. I'm very impressed.
I'm going to take it out.
Okay, good. That's fine. Take it out. Okay. Fantastic. Here, you can dry your hand. Yeah. Thank you so much. So, thank you so much to our brave volunteer. But what I wanted to do there was just to demonstrate that we can actually use this type of exercises to build our own resilience, even in your own kitchen. Maybe in your own kitchen you don't hold it as long, but I want you to challenge yourself to push through and hold it there for 30 seconds, maybe a minute, maybe even 2 minutes. Probably not more than 2 minutes, but 2 minutes as the maximum. And what you do is you learn to strengthen your resilience. You strengthen your ability to handle difficult things. Great. So, let's now look at how we can awaken our conscious leader. Because after all, that is the whole point of today's conversation. So a conscious leader is somebody who focuses on human first. It's somebody who is not afraid to bring conversations about love and compassion into the workplace. Now, I say that this is a conversation that used to be reserved for the yoga studio or the weekend retreat, where it's all sort of kumbaya and peace and love. But actually, research shows us that it's crucial that we bring these human elements into our workplaces. Because we are not human in the yoga studio and the weekend, and then we become machines when we enter the door of our workplaces. And that's the big distinguishing factor here, is that we need to be able to lean into our more human side and become our full human selves within our work organizations. Because as we've seen, it benefits our stress levels, it benefits our performance, and it also contributes to our bottom line. Not just because we're reducing that 8.8 trillion, but a very interesting study that came out of Oxford University's Wellbeing Research Center in conjunction with Indeed. They did this very interesting study where they created an index product on the stock exchange called the World Wellbeing 100 Index. So they took the 100 best performing companies in the US based on their work well-being factors. And then they invested $1,000 and watched the performance of this index of these 100 companies over 3 years. And actually, it outperformed. As you can see, the blue line is the Work Wellbeing 100. So it outperformed the S&P 500, it outperformed the Russell 3000 index, and it outperformed the NASDAQ composite. So it really gives us that financial assurance as well, that if there are any finance directors or CEOs in the room who might be thinking, well, this is all very nice, but I'm interested in the bottom line. Well, here's the evidence to support that it even contributes directly to our financial outcomes. So we don't even have to worry about that. So now that we've concluded that it takes care of our moral and ethical grounds, it takes care of our scientific brain neuroscience grounds, and also our financial research, I think we can all agree that we're moving in the right direction and that it will benefit us in so many different ways. So at Transformate, we look at the conscious leadership through this framework, where we find that we need to build towards creating these organizations. And when I say that, it's because we get a lot of requests from clients that reach out and say, we want to work on trust and psychological safety within our organization. And I said, great. So let's get your leadership team together and let's start with self-awareness. Let's start with nervous system regulation, and let's start with that whole brain, that two-side brain thinking. And they go, no, we just want to do the psychological safety training for the team. And then we go back to the drawing board, because you can't get there from there. You need to first start from the source. And I think this is one of the big things that we're missing a lot of the time, is that we try to skip the conscious leadership foundation and start working on, let's build a great well-being program. Fantastic. So you start running the program and you notice that the leaders are not attending. You think, I think we have a deeper problem here. Let's pause the well-being program and let's do a leadership retreat. And at first you get a lot of resistance. But then once you go through the explanation based on the evidence, you get more buy-in. And of course, by the time you finish with that and you go back to the well-being programs, you start to have some serious impact. And you start to build a change to transform the culture of the organization to become more conscious. So we like to focus on these first 3 steps, which is about recognizing, it's about regulating, and then it's about integrating. So these are the first 3 parts. So let's have a brief look at self-awareness. So becoming self-aware is basically just heightening the attention that you pay to your inner and outer worlds. So a lot of it has to do with being fully aware of what your values are, how your emotions show up, where they show up, how you feel them, becoming more aware, basically, becoming more conscious of that. Knowing your strengths and your weaknesses, knowing when to ask for help and who you need support from, knowing your triggers. Because a lot of the time when we're not aware of these things, we default into that unconscious responses that we spoke about earlier. It's also about becoming aware of our external impact. So how others react to us and how we impact and influence others. So how our behaviors, our energy. We're going to talk about this in a second, but it's really crucial to be aware of your energy when you interact with other people. And I have to say that during my 20 years in the corporate world in leadership roles, I never thought about the energy that I was bringing into the room. I would not check my energy before going in to have a difficult conversation with an employee or having a team meeting, etc. I was just thinking about the agenda and the points that need to be discussed, but I wasn't thinking about, am I in the right state of mind energetically to be having this conversation? Or is it better that I just maybe go for a walk, or maybe even get some better sleep and take this conversation tomorrow? So really becoming conscious of that is the first step. And the second step is about regulating our nervous systems. In fact, I would argue that if as a global collective, we took the responsibility to start regulating our nervous systems, we would see a tremendous impact in all levels of society and humanity. But of course, we have to do what we can with our circles of influence. And so this really has to do with how we manage our stress responses and our parasympathetic nervous system and our sympathetic nervous system. And so it's really about guiding that, those stress responses, those triggers, being able to be alert and focused and pay attention in a productive manner, but also being able to down-regulate our nervous system, to de-stress, to breathe, to do some meditation or go for a walk in nature, to really kind of learn how to down-regulate, to relax. And to be able to swing between the two when it's required. Because when we don't do that, we get caught up in the stress cycles where our nervous system is left unchecked, which then could lead to burnout and all those bad leadership ways that we talked about. And one of the important things is that our nervous system is contagious. So when we walk into the office, there's countless studies on this. Even our facial expressions can trigger stress and anxiety in our teams because you can feel that energy. You know, sometimes you can look at a leader, they might look confident and calm, etc., but you can feel that something isn't quite right. So there's a sort of a disconnection or a congruency there. And that's because the energy or the nervous system is doing something else, because we can try to mask it, but energy doesn't lie, and it spreads. So we need to take responsibility for that. And then the other concept is about this left brain and right brain thinking, which I think deserves a lot more attention. See, we tend to be more left dominant, and within that space, we tend to over-focus on metrics like short-term results or key performance metrics, which shouldn't be overlooked for sure, but we need both, that's the point. And left brain dominance, it neglects the long-term impact. It misses opportunities for creativity and innovation, etc. And it fails to create those cultures of compassion, that human connection. So we need to become more right-brained or balanced between the two. So if we're spending 80-90% of our time left brain, we need to switch that to like a 50-50. Because a right brain leader becomes more holistic in their approach to solving problems and analyzing situations. It enhances creativity, it creates psychological safety, it strengthens relationships because of all of those things that we discussed. And it really leaves your teams open and curious, which of course is the fundamental part of being a conscious leader and driving conscious organizations. And after this point, then we can start to build organizations of trust. Then we can start to build organizations of well-being and psychological safety. But first, we have to walk through the fire, so to speak. So my favorite way to reconnect with my right brain is to spend time in the Transformation Tree Lounge, which is our outside under the trees boardroom. And actually I wrote part of my speech sitting in this lounge. And actually we've almost entirely stopped doing leadership development in boardrooms or hotel banqueting facilities. No offense to boardrooms and banqueting rooms, but I think that if we want to enhance our conscious leader, we also have to connect more with nature, and we have to be more present. And we shouldn't forget that we are nature. So I want you to reflect today after you leave here on how can you recognize what's going on within you and around you. How can you practice regulating your nervous system more frequently? And how can you integrate the left and the right brain thinking? And I think if we do that, we can already make a huge impact on the world. Because after all, if leadership is the capacity to influence the thoughts, the emotions, and the behaviors of others, well, then it has to start with our own first. And I think the more we work together and the more we can sort of enhance the outcome. And to finish off, first of all, I want to say thank you so much for your attention today, and I hope you've been a little bit inspired to take some of these thoughts back into your workplaces. And to demonstrate how when we work together, we can have a bigger impact, I want to ask for one volunteer. Okay, we'll have our volunteer. You can just stay there, it's absolutely fine. Thank you so much. So if you can just start clapping at a rhythmic, comfortable pace. Fantastic. And then if I can get one more person to join. One more person to join in. Okay. Great. Great. And can we have one more person joining in? Great. How about this entire side? Can this entire side join in? Same clapping. Great. And what about over here? Can you all join in? Fantastic. Can we go faster? Can we get louder? Great. Oh, well, thank you very much. Fantastic. Well, when we work together, the noise, the energy, everything shifts upwards, providing that we come from that conscious place. So go out there and spread your conscious leadership to the world. Thank you so much.